Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, and the South African Police Service are at the center of a storm that has captured the nation's attention as a simple reminder about face covering spirals into political tension and public debate. The story begins with the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster issuing a social media post clarifying that SAPS members are prohibited from wearing buffs or face coverings in uniform unless part of specialized, approved operations. While the notice seemed routine, its timing immediately drew scrutiny because it closely followed Mkhwanazi's explosive July 6 media briefing in Durban, where he appeared flanked by masked, heavily armed officers. Could this be targeting Mkhwanazi, or is it just an enforcement of the rules? For viewers unfamiliar with the situation, LT Gen Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi delivered a media briefing that shook the policing world, revealing explosive allegations that led to Police Minister Senzo Mchunu being placed on leave. This briefing also triggered a judicial commission of inquiry and a parliamentary ad hoc committee probe. Mkhwanazi's use of masked officers during the press conference was unprecedented, raising questions about operational security, transparency, and public trust. What would you do if a top police official used such dramatic tactics in your community? The SAPS notice outlined that only members of specialized units like the Special Task Force, National Intervention Unit, and Tactical Response Team are allowed to conceal their identities during approved operations. Critics quickly linked the notice to Mkhwanazi's controversial briefing, suggesting that it was not merely a routine reminder, but a deliberate move to influence public opinion and discredit him. Others questioned why the reminder was posted publicly on social media, rather than being sent internally to SAPS members. Could this be a subtle attempt to shape the narrative against Mkhwanazi? Mkhwanazi's briefing itself was highly charged, revealing allegations of misconduct and triggering an unprecedented response from the government. The timing of the buff's notice, appearing just weeks later, fueled online backlash and suspicions that it was targeting the general personally. On social media platform X, many users defended Mkhwanazi, insisting that the officers present at the briefing fell within the stated exemptions and that the policy reminder was politically motivated. Do you agree or disagree with the public defense of Mkhwanazi? Public opinion was sharply divided. Some commentators argued that SAPS enforcement of uniform rules is necessary for transparency and accountability, while others claimed the notice was a thinly veiled attempt to undermine Mkhwanazi. A key point of contention was the emblem. The notice explicitly stated that the SAPS symbol may not be printed on any face coverings. Many questioned whether the officers alongside Mkhwanazi complied with this requirement. How important is visible identification for police accountability in your view? The Code of Conduct for SAPS mandates visible identification for officers, ensuring transparency and accountability. However, it allows exceptions for high-risk operations where concealing identity is critical for safety and operational integrity. Critics argue that the notice, though framed as a routine policy update, has become a flashpoint in the larger debate over policing ethics, operational discretion, and political interference. Could you see this escalating into a larger institutional conflict? In the wake of the July 6 briefing, Mkhwanazi became a lightning rod for controversy. Many argued that his dramatic presentation highlighted systemic problems within SAPS, including a lack of operational accountability and political influence. Others accused him of breaching protocol, creating unnecessary tension, and undermining public trust. What would you do if a senior officer in your area took such bold action? The social media backlash was intense, with users pointing to broader issues of police accountability beyond face coverings. Questions were raised about officers failing to wear name badges, about transparency, and about the ability of citizens to identify law enforcement officials. The buff's notice became symbolic of a deeper crisis in policing culture and public perception. Do you think justice and transparency are being served in this case? Some responses to the notice were positive, with commenters expressing relief that SAPS was clarifying the rules. These users felt that establishing clear standards for identity and operational procedures strengthens accountability, particularly in high-profile or sensitive operations. However, the majority of online discussion focused on suspicions that Mkhwanazi was being singled out due to his previous media briefing. How would you react if policies were enforced selectively against certain individuals? Experts in law enforcement stress that uniform policies and operational exceptions are necessary to balance safety with accountability. They also caution that public messaging must be carefully timed to avoid misinterpretation or suspicion. In this case, the proximity of the buff's notice to Mkhwanazi's briefing created a perception problem that continues to ripple through political and policing circles. Could miscommunication like this undermine trust in law enforcement? The implications of this controversy go beyond uniforms. Mkhwanazi's July 6th briefing raised fundamental questions about internal governance, political influence, and the role of media in law enforcement. Minister Mchunu's leave, the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, and parliamentary scrutiny all emerged as direct consequences. Citizens are now debating whether the SAPS is prioritizing rule enforcement or political maneuvering. Would you feel confident in police oversight if rules could be enforced selectively? Mkhwanazi's stance remains firm. His supporters argue that the general's actions were both necessary and lawful, intended to expose corruption and operational failures. Critics counter that such theatrics risk destabilizing trust in institutions and undermining the rule of law. The tension between operational transparency and political optics has left the public divided. What side of the debate do you support? Further complicating matters, the timing of SAPS reminders and public notices has highlighted potential weaknesses in communication strategies within the organization. The broader context of South African policing adds weight to this debate. Historically, high-ranking officers have navigated complex political and operational pressures, sometimes at the expense of public trust. Mkhwanazi's briefing tapped into this legacy, igniting discussions about accountability, corruption, and the limits of public communication. How much responsibility should officers have for public perception? Observers also point out that Mkhwanazi's briefing forced scrutiny of leadership at multiple levels. Minister Mchunu's leave and subsequent inquiries highlight the political stakes involved. These dynamics emphasize that internal disputes can rapidly escalate into national controversies, affecting public confidence in law enforcement. Would you have acted differently in Mkhwanazi's position? Do you believe SAPS enforced the rules fairly? Could the timing of a notice have been intentional? How should law enforcement balance operational discretion and public accountability? What lessons can ordinary citizens learn from this controversy?